And people are still, it's still, I think there was like a famous Andrew Ng quote, I don't know, maybe it's 6 or 7 years ago, where he said, "Hey, there's no, in 6 or 7 years, the world's not going to need radiologists." And it turned out to be the exact opposite, right? And they're all instances of AI augmenting his radiology skills as opposed to replacing. And so it's hard to predict, even things that seem very linear, or seem very direct, or very obvious. It's hard to predict what happens when these things actually percolate out into the economy and into the job market. So,
Well, I think job market wise, we're gonna see differences over the couple of years. What's your idea about that?
I think the safest one, and this is, I wish you could take credit for it, but it's, definitely a meme that's out there. You're going to be replaced by somebody else who's using AI, right? And so I think it's, it's just like the total number of financial analysts employed went up as a result of Microsoft Excel and spreadsheet applications and programs, percolating their way through the economy. Yes, there's probably a class of bookkeepers who didn't kind of survive the transition, but the total number of bookkeepers employed by the economy went up 10 to 20x, right? It didn't shrink. And so, there's different names for this, like, Jevons paradox or Say's law and so on, where when the cost of certain inputs comes way down, and in this case, the cost of a class of intelligence comes way down, the demand rises sometimes accordingly, or even in excess of that cost reduction. And so it's hard to predict. It's very, very hard to predict. There will be some, it's similar to the initial waves of computers and so on sweeping the workforce. There was a set of skills associated with being a good bookkeeper and keeping your tables in line, keeping your spreadsheets, paper spreadsheets kind of running. And then there was a different set of skills that came with knowing how to work Excel and knowing all the shortcut keys and how to create a formula, and so on. And then especially as all this stuff, when all this stuff moved from being paper to PCs was one thing, and then when it went from being PCs to networked PCs, and PCs where the spreadsheet is like a centrally managed doc and as a multi-user document, all these things were kind of differences and changes in how we, in this case, performed the bookkeeping function.
Yeah. So in the future, when an IRS comes to check your bookkeeping, we can just ask an agent, like, I just answer the questions he's asking.
We're probably not that far from that. Yeah, where the bookkeeping or the IRS agent will basically ask your personal agent for that data. Yeah.
Now, one last question I like to ask people is, there's a lot of AI tools in our day-to-day life. What particular one do you enjoy using that is something that's just built in the services that we use?
I just drove in for this interview, and DJX kept me wonderfully entertained.
It's your personal radio station.
Personal radio station that I don't have to share with my kids. Right? Exactly.